So once again, if you work backwards, and, you want to say I want a 50% increase in market share, you can look at your historical data over time. Once again, longitudinally, regularly looking at things, and you can project, and that's what forecasting is, and that's what kind of data mining and things of that nature are. But when we were talking before we did this, that made more sense to me. I'm trying to figure out in your mind how you see this working, or maybe you can explain it a different way. Because once again, usually the goals are top down. And you align your programs, your tactics to reach the goals, and then obviously you align your measurements with the tactics that you're doing. So could you explain a little how this works?
Absolutely. I think one of the concepts is really the top-down approach. Is that a flawed model? I think one of the elements that we see in the day-to-day is that we can push communication, we can try to drive a response, but the actual response, the real communication, is a two-way dialogue. And I think the communication goals is the closest to consumers and patients and the folks that we touch. And so that is actually more indicative of true market share and true transaction growth. And having insights at that level really would drive the fuller business goals, or be able to be a driving force in creating that market share in totality.
Okay.
Well, I think just to twist that a little bit more, we talk about balancing measures. Is the concept of hierarchy of measurement tactics or tiers, is the concept of 4 metrics that these are the only 4 metrics that matter, right? Or is there an opportunity to explore the ability to triangulate metrics, as you mentioned, to really balance some of the business goals with the communication goals in combination? And where do you see that happening in your brands, or in particular areas in the industry?
I mean, I think with, obviously with social media, the communications goals sometimes, certainly if you're in business as a for-profit entity, you need to sooner or later make money, whether you're in pharmaceuticals or widgets or something else. So having a community that loves you but never buys your product is a problem for a for-profit enterprise. But on the other hand, having people that buy your product for a short time but can't stand you because you're not really engaged with them in different ways out kind of in their community, that's a different kind of problem. So I kind of like this model too, to a degree. I'm still noodling it in my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anyone in the audience that can explain it to me? Lighten it up here. We're almost in the home stretch.
Well, I think just to keep to the promise of pushing through time, just maybe 2 more questions around metrics, which are insightful. What have you found that has really made an impact in terms of the programs that you manage and the brands that you're designing strategies for?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the marketing funnel, we can call them domains, you can call them parts of the patient journey, whatever you want. I mean, I'm not going to use a TV commercial and then measure prescriptions for the most part. I mean, there's certain ways to do that, obviously, but if you look at the marketing funnel, which is kind of laid on its side, it's big on one end, and then it kind of shrinks down, and the other end, you have expansion, differentiation, retention, and maybe advocacy. I try to chunk it and measure different points. So we measure, if acquisition's pretty easy to measure. If you're doing lead generation, you count leads, you do cost per lead. Pretty clear. When you get into databases and CRM, you have kind of these conversion things. Sometimes you can do it through self-reported data. Sometimes you have to triangulate through patient-level data that you have to buy, and there's a lot of analytics, and it's always backward-looking. But we look, a lot of times we'll look at 2 different kind of measures in that middle part. One is yield, so what is the conversion rate over a period of time, and the other is a concept called velocity. How fast is a patient moving through the continuum, and is there a way that we can help lubricate or accelerate their journey, whether it's through better information, a better connection with their physician, a better process for their decision making, and then obviously on the retention side, there's a group of metrics you can look at. But we tend to once again look at kind of the activity metrics, the program level metrics, and then the higher level business objectives. And a lot of times they're supported. We once again triangulate. We have self-reported data, we have some activity data, and then we will probably buy data from one of the large data vendors.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and we used to use a similar funnel model where the person is just having symptoms and going all the way through to retention or adherence. And there are different points through that where you have different tactics and different initiatives that you'll undertake, and you can measure each of those and what the success is. whether it's a, email program, acquisition program, conversion, so forth, and looking at those over time, what's the success, and even in some cases the pre-post. So as somebody enters, and this is old school, but as somebody enters the website, what are their impressions, what are their expectations, and so forth, and then when they leave, were those met, what are they going to do next? So there's other ways of measuring that too.
It takes a lot of discipline to do test and control. To have the money and the creative to do a national program, but say, you know what, we're going to keep it dark in 80% of the U.S. and we're only going to test it in 20% because we really, really want to know the answer. And sometimes that could take 6 months, it could take 12 months, and it's hard for people because you may gain a lot of learning, which would inform the next 2 or 3 years of your, say, big TV spend. But for that period where you're black in 80% of the country, you're giving your competitors kind of a temporary advantage. So there's a lot of discipline that goes with this. There's a lot of, once again, if you're in this job 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, you're going to want to care what the results are. But if you're not, that's a different mindset. So I think we've got to think a little more long-term about the health of the brand, the health of our patients and our physician customers, and say what's best for them, not how can I get promoted as quickly as possible by coming up with almost not a sham metrics, but very kind of shallow measurement program that is really looking at a quick read. You stick your finger in, it looks good, you get promoted, the next person comes in and does the same thing. So you got to look at it as more of a systematic, once again, systematic, longitudinal, regular approach so that you're measuring things the same way each time and you're doing it at regular intervals so you can actually see shifts in behavior or shifts in intent or things like that.
I think we are out of time, but if we could field maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. There's a question in the back.
What qualitative metrics do you look at when you examine ROI? What qualitative metrics do you look at when you're looking at ROI? So for example, when leads are coming in, are you doing quality scores on an individual patient basis based on leads that are coming in, or is it just more of a factor of, hey, this campaign generated 25,000 leads? Are there individual qualities assigned to those? Qualitative?
I mean, you could do that. I mean, there's companies like Fair Isaac that do value scoring. I mean, I tend to stay away from that because sometimes not that helpful and the data is crazy expensive. What we can do is look downstream. So if we look, if we have 5 different ways to collect leads, maybe one of them is WebMD, one of them is an email campaign, one of them is direct response TV, one of them is, phone or something else. And then we actually, we give them all, each cohort gets tagged in the database with a certain, inbound mark on them. And then I can actually look 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later and say, you know what, the leads from WebMD converted at a faster rate and at a much higher rate. And the leads I got from DRTV were junk, or they were, not quite as ready for the therapy, or not quite as ready to make that decision. So it takes time, and once again, it takes discipline, and you got to stick with it. You can't, but it's also good to know that if, let's say, management drops money on you, or you want to shift money, that you can say, well, there's a lot of headroom in DRTV, or there's a lot of headroom because I know the leads, are maybe smaller in WebMD, but the quality is better, or something like that. So you start making trade-offs. But I hate to say this, it's cliche, but time will tell a lot of times. I mean, it's hard in pharma to get instant gratification. So you get a bunch of leads, and you can hold them up almost like somebody who's making wine. You can actually look at the sugar content of the grape before you crush the grape. You can't really do that with a database, at least I'm not aware of.
Any other questions? I'd like to thank the
Speaking of grapes.
Speaking of grapes, thank you very much for your